Let's make sense of this end. The Central Bank of Kenya, CBK, has granted a United States of America-based bank the chance to open a branch in Kenya in line with the Banking Act. In a statement on Monday, CBK announced the authorization of the representative office of JP Morgan Chase Bank, NA, in Kenya. The bank has an estimated worth of 1.103 trillion Kenya shillings. CBK explained that representative offices of foreign banks in Kenya serve as marketing and liaison offices for their parent banks and affiliates and are not permitted to undertake banking business under the Banking Act. The government is now fiddling with the idea of letting private players partake in the standard testing process through a private-public partnership with the Kenya Bureau of Standards. The Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry Cabinet Secretary Salim Mvurya now says accreditation should be provided to private firms to achieve a more global perspective on quality standards to ensure Kenyan products stand a chance on international shelves.
Amidst an apparent rush into privatization to promote the bottom-up economic transformation model, the government has set its sights on opening up the Kenya Bureau of Standards to private players to promote a global perspective on upholding quality standards in the country.
That there are many things that are changing across the globe in terms of products, in terms of services, in terms of technology and many others. I think KEBS needs to take a strategic shift where now we look at the issue of partnering with private sector and other investors.
While the loopholes that may emerge from staking out the standards body to private players are immense, the Cabinet Secretary insists that the changing global perspectives demands a shift by KEBS, casting doubt on its capability to adjust fast enough.
Because I'm sure KEBS cannot have the capacity to do everything, including the labs that we have now. We need to see how we can work with the private sector and other partners so that we can have accreditation of other facilities that are beyond the capacity of KEBS, and then we can be able to have a proper certification.
This comes as KEBS is being encouraged to adopt AI in its daily operations to make it easier to sift out counterfeit products and reduce corruption in the sector.
Those of you who truly believe in safeguarding your reputation and that of our country must call these criminals out. We cannot allow a few people to jeopardize a whole nation and its people for selfish personal gain.
While KEBS is prone to corruption due to its delicate role in authenticating product quality, the government is now narrowing down to zero-fault auditing reporting, placing authorities and regulatory bodies to finally nip the vice in the bud. Privatization is the order of the day as the government continues to endorse a public-private partnership for a majority of government agencies and even corporations. And the Kenya Bureau of Standards might be the next organization on the operating table as the government fiddles with the idea of ensuring that private partakers might be giving standards to a lot of products in the country. Hibak Said for TV47 Nairobi.
Thank you, Hibak. The Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, is working tirelessly with security agencies to address the rising cases of truck drivers being attacked and robbed along the Mombasa-Malaba highway. Speaking during the launch of the one-stop border post at Malaba, Commissioner of Border Control and Enforcement Shege Macharia issued a stern warning to the attackers, stating that KRA's top management is actively developing strategies to curb the insecurity affecting truck drivers. Macharia also cautioned individuals involved in stealing tracking devices from long-distance trucks, warning that stern action would be taken against them.
we had the DIG coming to Times Tower to discuss this issue of truck drivers being attacked on the road. And we discussed, and he made calls. He did not promise to go and act. He made calls, and he said the issue will be sorted. And I tend to believe the issue is being addressed with the seriousness it deserves. Things will be very rough. Tell those people who are using our batteries, the Seals batteries, to light their houses, because it stays longer, like 2 weeks when you charge it with solar, that you either move your house to heaven, but if it is here on earth, I can assure you, DCI, NIS, they are working on it.
That's what we had in the world of business. Let's get sporty.
Sports news brought.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
I mean, I've heard my learned friend, Mr. Kiptu, say that this is purely, or rather, it's largely a political process. And I agree entirely. But you know, the public process, the political process is being done in public space. Part of it is public participation, that is public space. Part of it is the standing orders. Those are the procedures in Parliament. But let me tell you this, that there is nothing that happens in void the Constitution of Kenya. There is nothing that happens which is not captured in the protection of the people of Kenya through the Constitution and of course other legislative other legislation. So if members of Parliament, the National Assembly feels that we can do what we want to do, and by the way, you heard today the Senate Speaker reading, you know, a ruling then referring to several decisions of the Senate itself and also of the Court of Appeal. What does that tell you? There is no arm of government that operates in isolation. So if the National Assembly decides to box somebody into a corner and assume that he has to answer us in 2 hours, and the National Assembly thinks the 2 hours is good, we have not spoken, we have given him all the time, that will not fall well. That will not go down well with the Article 50 of the Constitution that demands for fair trial. So without necessarily predicting what will happen in the Senate, really, the Senate has demonstrated, like the former speaker has said, that they have that experience of having tried several impeachments, you know, from the counties. So they have that knowledge. And one of the exceptional knowledge they have developed is that of giving the accused, the person in trial, a chance to explain himself. And now, what are you supposed to explain yourself to? That is where the National Assembly actually failed. The National Assembly came together, they collected 291 signatures the previous day, then they rushed public participation on Friday. They realized it was not enough, so again on Saturday they again extended it. The Seventh-day Adventists said, oh, that was Sabbath, we were not given enough time, and you've seen now, you know, some of their members have gone to court. So these are all issues that the Senate must look at. Was the process regular? Was it procedural as per the Constitution of Kenya? By the way, if it was not regular, if it was not procedural, it will not be a constitutional process. And that's why you see several people have gone to the High Court to say, even before you really take this motion up to the Senate, look, the procedures used are actually strange to the Constitution of Kenya, so can we have it stopped? By the way, the High Court can stop that process. They are not stopping the Senate from entertaining the matter, but they are telling the Senate that the process being used is actually irregular already. Much as it is rather political, I mean, we have to guard and guide the Constitution. We have to, people must operate in a certain known highway, not in a strange highway. So whether you are members of Parliament, by the way, the judiciary itself cannot operate outside the Constitution. So the whole point here is that the people must be allowed to be sovereign. Their document that is supporting their operations must be respected. And so the courts, to that extent of saying the procedure used, because the National Assembly procedure is completed, it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, they have already made a ruling and they have said this must go up to the upper chamber so that it can be tried. So this can be handled at its level. Okay. So my point is that we cannot, whether it is a political process, whether it is a spiritual church process, whether whatever you call it, Shakahola, or whatever you are in church, or we have a right to tell the people what we want to tell them, the Constitution always comes at play. Okay.
Mheshimiwa Beatrice, this National Assembly has really been on the receiving end on, how it is conducting itself. Even, when Wakili here talks about the supposed hurried public participation. Do you think it is an indictment on the Honorable House?
Well, first of all, and that is why Article 50 was removed. You see, if we follow just to the latter Article 150, we don't even need to be speaking about the courts or the process, because the process is well stipulated, and how many days you're supposed to do this process, and how it's supposed to leave your chamber to go You have only 7 days. You finish, you take it to the Senate. It's very clear. But because in Kenya, I know everyone will wish to have them, especially the lawyers, like we did the constitution for lawyers in this country. So they define it in the way they would wish it suits me. It is not even supposed to go to court in real sense.
Okay.
And that is why it doesn't even have IEBC. So why are we not questioning? Why are the lawyers not saying, in fact, we need an IEBC? Why? Because they know by law they knew the moment you finish it, it goes back, it comes back to the National Assembly, and the president appoints the nominee, you approve the nominee, and you give him. The reasons they knew very well, the experts, that is how it's done all over the world. And so they picked exactly how the US impeachment is done, and they just brought it in 150. Now we must accept that we borrowed. And so all these things that we didn't do well, now the next thing I'll always ask, which the courts have never even explained to Kenyans, what is a threshold of public participation? Is it the numbers? Is it the people? Is it the documentation you give? What is the threshold? And until we get a law of public participation is when you can stand firm and say, so the threshold of public participation in impeachment is this, and of these others are this. How does a county assembly remove a governor?
So according to you, the public participation was done correctly?
Well, what is the threshold? I would wish the media to tell us. What is the threshold? What are we supposed... I don't know. That's why I'm saying you have done public participation. People came. Yes. Is that what we call... Is that what Kenyans say is a threshold? Is that what the courts are saying is a threshold?
So why do you go for this public participation?
Exactly. The court said you do, and the Constitution says it's only that we must put in a law, so that you put in all those things, so that you are able to now say, yes, there was, based on threshold, just the same way today's Senate did with the Kericho case. The threshold was this. There's no half a person, there's no quarter person, there's no, you can't. It's a person. That's how they were able to say, look, there was no threshold. And that is a few questions we're asking. But for me, we are in a learning process. Even the lawyers, they don't know. Where have they seen impeachment? And so they will come and now tell us on this screen, this is the time we are now testing Article 150 of the Constitution of Kenya. Even the lawyers should be also researching and not telling us. You should be telling us how it was done in the US during those times when we had the Nixons and all this, even just the recent one of Trump. How did it flop that it did not go through and all that? I wish one of those lawyers would come out and tell us, this is how we are thinking. But for me, the process we have done, all these questions, how I wish we waited for the Senate to now do their part and say, after that, is when you can question whether we have done justice to the deputy president, where we've given him fair administrative justice or not. But you see now when you question the National Assembly, and there's no place, the National Assembly, the law, the framework that we were given in the Constitution says you have to question him, you have to ask, he can question so-and-so, or question even the mover. There's no place. You are told you must hear him in silence.
Silence.
And that's what they gave him.
So I think Maringa, Honorable Elachi is also not mentioning that there's a bill, that there's a proposed bill on the public participation.
Yes,
but even without that bill, if you look at the reasoning of the courts on the matters that have been decided by the High Court in terms of what is at the moment considered to be sufficient public participation, reasonable time. Reasonable time has always been repeated, and the goodwill in terms of if you are calling people within Dagoretti North, Dagoretti North to do public participation, isn't it?
Let's bring in.
I mean, you cannot tell people in the morning and in the evening you are telling them we have the answers, and then you go to Parliament and it's the public participation is on a Sunday, and then it's extended to Saturday, and on Monday you have collected and summarized all the 47 counties, and then on Tuesday you are actually giving a report.
Really, my senior should tell me, as he comes in, my senior should tell me two things. The question was either yes or no.
No. Okay.
So I'm wondering how you'll sit in a hall and question that and
Joshua.
say you need 7 days to ask yes or no.
Joshua,
I'm wondering.
Yes. Allow me then to speak. I think they have had their time.
Yes.
So number one, I would want to take us back to understand the concept of public participation. Where did it come from and what was the idea behind public participation? Leaders are elected, and that's why I have my former colleague and our current MP, my MP, Dagoretti, Honorable Beatrice Elachi. The meeting point between Mheshimiwa and the constituents primarily is at the time of election, when she was being elected, where she had to do a lot of campaign and then gets elected. Once she gets elected, she settles into her respective position and has to discharge her mandate in terms of representation and legislation. But there's always that question that used to arise. Where then do we have the input of the public towards Mheshimiwa's work, which is legislation? And importantly, the core of her work being representation. Where is the voice of the people? That is where, in the constitution we have, public participation became a constitutional issue to be considered. Now, once you understand that philosophy, the idea is basically to try to bring on board the views and wishes of the people. Basically have a feel and say, what do people think about this? What then becomes is a leader or an institution, whether a legislative institution or even a government institution, because public participation is not just for the legislature, even the executive. And that's why you've seen the courts quashing so many administrative actions or pieces of legislation for lack of public participation, because they say, what is the input of the people? Now, let's now come to the process, which now becomes the point of debate. What is the threshold? And I think county governments offer the best lesson, so far so good. Compared to the national government, county governments are the front line when it comes to public participation. And the experience of county governments is that the reason why devolution was made was government to go closer to the people, where there is that nexus between the wishes of the people and the real-time governance they see, they feel. And that's where public participation has been more or less practiced and effected over a period of time. Every small step of the way, there must be those forums, whether you are doing community halls, and public participation is not just the aspect of one-on-one town hall meetings. It can go to the extent of people writing petitions, people writing memorandums. There are several aspects of it. So when it comes to threshold, I feel it's more of a moving target, and the courts help on matters interpretation. Let us get it clear. I think we keep blaming one arm against the other, yet we forget they are interdependent. The role of the court is to interpret the law that is already there. They don't legislate. So the court would say threshold in terms of the laws you've already done. And in this case, let me use this case, and that's why I wanted to disagree a bit with my senior Nyaribo.
Yes.
The idea of doing the public participation on Saturday came from the courts itself. Because they set the threshold. They said, if you do at the county level, it may not be representative enough. Why? The logistics of getting the voice of the county people under one. If, for example, you're doing in Nandi, how are you able to get 6 constituency people from the far ends all the way to Kapsabet to give their views within that period of time? Let me assume 1,000 people show up. Will they have reasonable time to give? Then the court saw it fit to decentralize and say, let us go at the constituency, because what is the threshold? An MP is the sole voter in parliament over this impeachment. So let this MP face his or her constituents, get their voice, then apply it. For me, that threshold meant at least you've spread it out more. Now, when it comes to question of timing, it is not done in isolation. It is done together with the threshold or in accordance with the timeline set within which this process must conclude. And Parliament was time-bound over a number of days. So you have to squeeze in between and try get as much as possible. Lastly, which is more important, when it comes to the Senate, this question of public participation coming to the fore, I've realized there's another argument that is still hanging in the sense that were people sensitized enough about the process? And that's why Beatrice Elachi said it was a yes and no question. Now, for me, I felt that the answer to that would have been, as at the time they were opening those town halls and starting those sessions, they would have done 2 hours of explaining the charges, explaining the provisions of the law, and explaining that decision. You see the way we do voter education? You tell the voter, when you tick and say, I approve. So as long as Parliament can confirm tomorrow at the trial chamber that we were able to do first 2 hours, educated the people, then you tell them make decisions. That's it.
Okay.
So civic education.
We did at Boma so well. And I did in my constituency so well.
Just as I finished then, so at the end of the day, and that's why I was saying it's more of a political process. I'm focused on the outcome. The courts will play their role. I just disagree with British election on one point.
Let's take a break.
Let me just finish this because it's very important.
Okay.
There's a comment people made. They said, what is the role of IBC? Trust me, IBC will have a role in terms of gazettement. Number 2, what is the role of courts? Speaker Kingi has clearly said you cannot inject them in their legislative work, but court can administratively review the decision. So the courts will still have its say. So you can't oust its jurisdiction.
Hold that, ladies and gentlemen. That we take a break because the director is on my case. Then we come back and continue because this discussion is just getting started. Keep your questions, feedback and comments coming. We are coming back in a short while you're watching the Daily Report with me, George Maringa. Orodo Nyama is on sign language interpretation to stay with us.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
You're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
You're watching The Daily Report. Welcome back. The conversation just getting heated on air and off air with my guests, Ishmael Nyaribo, the Honorable Beatrice Elachi, and Joshua Kipto. Before we went on a break, again, you wanted to, remedy and recommend how we should be interpreting the law.
No, you see, really the main issue is we are all in one house called the Kenyan Constitution and the sovereignty of the people. Whatever semantics we give it, at the end of the day, whether we have to wait for the Senate to interrogate this matter, whether the Senate would be asking, should the Deputy President have been subjected to questions in Parliament before the question was put to the public, for public participation, or the Deputy President should have been tried in the National Assembly first, then the question carried to the people.
Because he said on TV he was not given a chance to be heard.
Yeah, and then here you hear members of Parliament are saying he should not have come on air on Sunday evening, I believe.
Monday.
That was Monday in the evening, before the next day when he was being crucified, quote unquote. So what comes first? I mean, this is what the courts will be interested in. And like the honorable member here is saying, it is true that this is a learning process, and my colleague is saying it's a moving target. It is true. The question of public participation, by the way, is not young in this country. The only problem is that the members of parliament have not enacted the specific law to control, to guide rather the public participation. But what comes first will be considered. All I am saying is that in the Senate must exhibit the maturity they have shown in the Kericho impeachment today. So that in as much as this is a political contest really, you must remember that you have Kenyans that you are carrying the country on your shoulders. You can drop it down or actually take it to a safe place. You can decide, okay, the head of state may not like Gachagua, and many politicians don't like Gachagua, but the people who finally elected him are 7+ million. He may have his own dirty, linen. He may have his own problems. What are we going to do with the Kenyans who actually voted for him and still like him? So that is, for me, the main issue. It's not a question of politicians have ganged up and it's a political process and they are going to annihilate him in the Senate. That's not the question here. And by the way, the Senate, again, we all agree, is a trial chamber.
Okay.
So the question of it's political, it's not a slide downwards the hill, down the hill. It is inquisitive, approach. We are putting this to the Deputy President. What is his answer? We are putting this other one. What is? Then the Senate should be asked, each member, are you voting from 1 to 11? Which one are you agreeing with? You could be surprised that 6 charges might be proved, but not that all the 47 or 67 members of the Senate are actually proving that. So the guy might actually get off the hook.
In terms of precedents, when you look at how this has been addressed, are you even worried as legislators that perhaps this could even happen in your case? Because there are pundits and other politicians who have argued across the divide that this could be happening to the DP, but it could also befall the same members of parliament.
Yeah, but we have no process of impeachment.
Yeah.
It is
recall.
It is a recall.
We call recall,
and
yes.
it can happen. That is why all these articles are there.
Okay.
I thought we put them in knowing very well that at one point it might find me or another person.
Okay.
Yes, because I have also gone through an impeachment.
Yes.
So it's a matter of you wait for that process, then you just go to court. But for this one, you see these other impeachments, even for the governor, there is no clear framework. It's impeachment from the county assembly, you come. But then let me say this. As I said when we started and went through public participation, yes, the question was the 11, you explained them, but they are very clear. I think the best the Senate will do is first do sort of like a pre-chamber
pre-trial
to agree on what is admissible and what is not.
They did that.
And so if they've done that, it means they've narrowed down. Now we've gone to the real charges. Now we are not spreading to the 11.
Absolutely.
Now you have clustered them based of gross violation, violation of the Constitution, Chapter 6. Now I think we are in that context now. I believe, having been in the Senate, he will be given the lawyers, everyone. But he will also expect the same way when you're in court. Questions will come in many angles even. I think he needs to look at the impeachment of the deputy governor of Kisii. That will help him to understand that when you're in such a scenario, and the Senate is now, the Senate will look at anything that you have ever done of gross violation of the Constitution, of Chapter 6. So it's up to him to look and realize the same way you normally go to court and a lawyer will take you to another journey where you were not even expecting. It's the same way. So for me, and then in terms of looking at the same public participation, you remember in some parts they refused to go for public participation, which was very wrong. They needed to have gone to public participation and bring in the forms saying, we don't agree. And you must go back now to the ruling of Maraga when he did the nullification. Remember, he took us back to the ballot. And when people, those who rejected to go back to the ballot, Maraga said, we gave you an opportunity. You yourselves refused to go. So all those rulings are there to remind them, if you come in with the process of public participation, it was not done right. Yet in your own backyard, you decided not to do that public participation so that you bring in the numbers to say no. Then again, it will be questionable. Then you might find yourself also in more crisis, thinking it was not the issue of threshold, but it will be the issue, your own people did not do that public participation to give their views in terms of what they feel is wrong. And so I would wish, and as I said, it is a process where we are looking at, we are learning, but I know the Senate will do justice to the process. Whatever verdict that comes, at least Kenyans will have understood why is it that it will go this way or this way. Even Kenyans maybe will, Kenyans are very good in starting to participate when they realize, and that's what they did with the impeachment of the deputy governor of Kisii. They realized, you did this. They started now participating. You could feel now Kenyans becoming more angry. So I'm hoping it will not elicit to anger where Kenyans also will feel very angry in the whole process. Either way.
I think the public participation, I just want to compliment something she mentioned about people refusing. I feel that protest is a form of public participation. Why? They protested. Some tore down the papers to express their disgust and refusal to agree to the impeachment itself. Then ultimately, the parliamentary staff, I could see, were bringing more documents. And at the end of the day, they still sign. And you could see the results that were tabled before the National Assembly, where in those areas you could see 97%, 100%. I saw for Mukurweini, the MP was touting how in his constituency with 3,000 that attended, 100% said no. So I never wish to ascribe how people should behave. I have personally been a champion of public participation and I've attended them to the point that, one, you never dictate the reaction of the people. You can only focus them on the issue, but you cannot dictate how they respond, how they react. Let them be, let them express themselves. And in the same public participation, you're also able to gauge public mood, which for us, you tick a box for knowing what the people want. And that's why, for example, from the public participation that happened, two messages were clear. Yes, we agree with the impeachment of the deputy president, but he's not alone. That was more or less a common messaging, where they were saying, we need to see this wholesomely. And then it was the duty of the parliamentarians to come back to them and tell them, that's okay. If you want to remove both of them, no problem. But the process that is before us right now is for one of them. So let us deal with this one. Anyone can come with an impeachment, for example, for the president, then we'll come back to you. So you focus them, but you don't forget to take their concern. You don't forget to get their reaction raw. Don't dictate. It's not a classroom. Let them be. Let them express. As long as there's no violence, we are good to go. Importantly, the reason why we keep saying Senate is mature and Senate will do a better job is simply because of the fact that Senate is smaller than the National Assembly. You have 67 members. National Assembly is almost 6 times the number. 349 MPs. What time will you have to have comments from all those MPs? And these are learned people. These are Waheshimiwas. And Waheshimiwa, by virtue they were elected, it shows they are opinionated. I kid you not, every 49 member of that house has a comment to make. Whether in proper English or in Kiswahili, they are sure to express themselves. That's why they were elected, and that's why they are representative. So with 349, it's a huge crowd for you to get ample time to prosecute to the detail. That's why you could see the National Assembly Speaker was struggling to give even the move of the motion, say 30 minutes. And then the move of the motion was forced then to donate and say, I give MP Kaluma 10 minutes, I give Otienda Amolo 5 minutes, to try spread it out, say, I only need my 10 minutes. Now, Senate has one advantage. The numbers are minimal. And number two, it's a trial chamber, not considering a motion. Parliament was basically to consider a motion of whether to adopt or to reject. Okay. Now, Senate is to conduct proper trial, and that's why there's cross-examination. Look at the issue today. They started with the PO, preliminary objection, whether the threshold was made for the impeachment of the Governor Kericho. And that was given 2-hour period. Senators were given time to ventilate, then it went to a vote. So issue by issue. And like the National Assembly, where they blanketly had to affirm or reject the entire motion, in the Senate, it will be one charge after the other. Then remember, a threshold for impeachment, one charge is enough to take you home. You can survive 10 out of 11. But one is enough to convict you. That's another red herring people need to see. Okay. So the defense of the deputy president is up against the wall to ensure they seek complete dismantling of 11 out of 11. Because if Senate agrees with let me assume the defense does a good job and acquits him 8 out of 11. What happens to the other 3? Still voted for. And if he fails in one single vote and the threshold is met of 2/3, game over. And that's how it is going to be. Yeah. So today I was impressed by the manner of the thoroughness of the team, of the defense team. They came, it reminded me of when Azimio were taking their truckloads of evidence to Supreme Court. Something similar happened today in the evening. If you saw the deputy president's team came with boxes and boxes of evidence. I'm just concerned about the timing. At least Supreme Court had around 21 days to listen through the submissions, sum them up. Senate has already done pre-trial. They've already agreed on the methodology where they're saying it's not going to be committee, it will be the entire house. Number 2, they have already allocated time. Number 3, they have even given the prosecution, timeline specifics, you have the defense. So the evidence may be for the purposes of optics and maybe to make reference to documents. So you would find that the National Assembly team, who will be the prosecutors, will also have to come absolutely prepared, and Senate now gives them ample time. So with this, the advantage of Senate is the numbers are less. Number 2, it's a proper trial like a court process. That gives it. So I am sure with that, Nyaribo will be comfortable that the process has been done. But ultimately, do you know what matters? Ultimately, it will be subjected to a vote. It will boil down to aye and nay. And that's what will matter. No one will bother about the arguments. Yes.
I think 2 things. One, the Senate is mature. I must repeat this and must be very, really it must get home that Senate is not the kind of chamber you throw in stuff and try to see what works and what doesn't work. They have lived that experience through how they have handled impeachments from the counties, and they bring the governor over there, and the MCAs are extremely excited, and they have the numbers, and then it reaches over there, and then they give the governor the chance, the same way they give the MCAs the chance. So, and then they actually, MCAs get surprised that, we came to the trial chamber with 31 members of parliament, but the law provides for 32. So what can we do? There is no way the Senate can squeeze in an extra member. And I believe when my brother is talking about time, by the way, this is a very serious issue, even in the courts. Are you prosecuting time or a substantive motion, a substantive issue? Yes. So now the Senate has given time frames for, discharging their mandate. Then here is evidence that has been brought in. Of course, say, like in the Raila case, there was evidence that was brought at the last minute and it was rejected. But this particular one, what is going to prevent you from admitting this evidence? Is it because of time, or it is because it is irrelevant type of evidence? So we must be cautious when we talk about prosecuting a case, and then we are completely consummated in the time frame and actually leave out the substance, the real issues, that are supposed to be handled by a Senate. So for me, if the Senate is able to look at the evidence, that's fair enough. But in terms of how they will look at all the charges, my brother said, yes, if you fail in one. How do you fail in one? You fail in one if the two-thirds majority actually vote for that one. So about, 40 members might actually vote for count 6 goes through, and, with the 44 people. But in count 5, you only have 32. And yet in count 9, you have 50 for that matter. So still, the ones who have voted here in the 50 have not voted. So it is not an easy walk in the Senate. And like Honorable Beatrice said, Kisii deputy governor, by the way, that's a classic example, isn't it? In cross-examination, they will want to see how the deputy president handled his brother's family. They would want to see. But in the end, there is a charge sheet. All the arguments must be pegged to the charges before the Senate. Okay. These other behavior that he was involved in, these, like you saw the Kericho governor one, like, I don't know, this and that, or some funny other, allegations. Do they fit in or they don't fit in? If they don't fit in, they definitely are offside.
Mheshimiwa, the Deputy President yesterday in Embu hinted at, exploring legal options after the, whichever way it goes. In his words, he said he believes in the courts. And here we are dealing with two situations: the current, the petitions right now, and those that he alluded to that would happen afterwards. Does he have legal options in the courts after whatever happens in the Senate?
Well, he has, but you see, the whole process also, the courts will look at what does the Constitution in principle give us time frame. So they cannot exceed the 60 days. In all this, they cannot. They have to be within that, unless they want to now open, and they can exceed, but then they will not put it at status quo. So this other process will continue, and for you, you'll continue with your process in court. But you should know there will be already another deputy president as you continue with this.
So where does that leave,
that is why it's important. I believe he has a very good legal team. They have to look at all those issues. Yes, they have to. But in terms of principle of the Constitution, that's what the courts, because they are the interpreters of the same Constitution. They will follow that. But they will not deny him to proceed with his face to look for justice. But he has to really know it is within that time frame that he has been given yeah.
All right. I think the deputy president needs to make a hard decision.
Yeah.
Why I say so? Because the window is closing fast. There's something about impeachments that come with finality. Once you are impeached, it doesn't matter what you do. You've seen what has befallen very solid leaders who've been impeached. Despite their political capital, they are literally impotent politically. There's nothing they can do. You have former Governor Sonko, you have former Governor Kiambu Waititu. These are more or less asset, politically speaking. They can be part of your team. They can help you mobilize, and I'm sure you know their capability and capacity. But to what end? And voters are very decisive in the sense that if they want to follow, for example, Honorable Beatrice, it's because they are going to vote for her or against her. If you are not in the ballot, then that comes to a cropper. So for me, I feel it's now time beyond these discussions of fairness or unfairness. I would want the deputy president to leave this conversation to his lawyers purely to argue these points that we are arguing here about fairness or unfairness. However, he then needs to move a step further, sit with his political and whether you call it spiritual friends, and see the two options. One option, resign before the impeachment is finalized. But resign with a half, in a way you create a lot of capital out of it. You have a fighting chance in the future. You never know how that can spin off to something. That's one. Number two, the idea of relying on court, it's a give and take. So far, so good. If I'm the deputy president, how comes I've lost all the cases that have come to court? Because the legislature is also working very hard to ensure compliance. In fact, when Parliament was given an order that same Friday, when the leaders were already in the field, it was at around 1:30 p.m. Everyone assumed that the executive and the parliament will come at judiciary and go file an objection seeking suspension of those orders. What did they do? In record 1 hour, they gazetted that, fine, we are going to comply to the letter. Tomorrow, Saturday, we are going to do at the constituency level. And let me tell you the beauty about it. Do you know in that space, court and parliament created a new threshold that we are talking about here? Now there's a threshold of public participation by legislatures. Now we know if you want to do public participation, it is at the constituency level. And parliament now will have to follow that because courts have affirmed and themselves they did it and it worked. So for me, the deputy president then has to make that hard decision of whether to resign before then. Number two, if it is to rely on courts, it's a chancing game and the courts basically interpret. One question I saw is that, do the court have ability to interfere? They cannot interfere. The courts do not interfere, and they're not wishing to interfere. They have made it clear. Even if you saw the judge recusing himself and asking the Chief Justice to constitute a panel of 3 because of the weighty nature of this matter, why were they doing that? Because they know the magnitude and how important this is in the architecture of governance. So, for me, I would then say, the courts only offer reprieve if the process is impugned. So far, so good. National Assembly has taken a major milestone in the sense of public participation, and by virtue the courts haven't issued any orders, it should be a telltale sign to the Deputy President, His Excellency Rigathi, that it's time to make hard political decisions. One of it, don't allow your die to be cast with impeachment, unless you have the
Let's take a break, and then when you come back, we also, I come back with also the issue that, Mheshimiwa Lachi, there are even names that are being proposed for his supposed
But this unfair advice to the deputy president should not go unchallenged, but we will wait when we come back.
It's a very fair political advice. It's a realistic advice.
Well, the lawyers will say unfair because all of them are lined up in a business
to be paid for the process.
To do work.
Yeah,
and when we come
which is still good for the constitution or for the country, because from this process we are putting into practice. I've told you a provision that no one imagined it would come to force.
Marika, I'm not representing the deputy president, and he's not like my friend, so I am just giving a honest political advice.
Mine is unsolicited political advice. At the end of the day, he has to make a political decision. To what end?
Let's take a break. When we come back, we continue with this discussion. We can see your questions and comments. You'll also be throwing them to our panelists. Stay with us.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
You're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Daily Report, a fiery conversation right here on Power and Politics with my guests Ishmael Nyaribo, Beatrice Elachi, and Joshua Kipto. Mheshimiwa Elachi, I mean, even off there, you were talking about the legal options that exist, and even when you look at the evidence, because at the end of the day, the Senate, which sits as a court, relies on evidence.
Yes.
And in this one, the 67 senators will poke into every evidence available.
Oh, yes.
Talk to us about the options really for the number 2.
You see, for me, that's why I said if it was in Europe, there are some issues here where if it was a leader in Europe who would have resigned. Why? When the matter of your late brother comes into play, and the law in Kenya is very clear, when you have been given the power to administer a will, you are not allowed by law to be the beneficiary.
Okay.
You are not even allowed to buy. You can give it to the family and now buy it from them, but not direct. So that matter, I don't know whether my deputy president looks at it and doesn't imagine this is the matter that is coming into this trial. And it's going to be very serious because people will be asking, even his people from home will be asking one question. Where are the children of the late Gachagua, of the first wife, who is there, who used to live in the UK? Where? Where is Gachagua and Kerigo in all this matter? Did the father say they cannot share anything? And so you'll be questioned so hard to explain why. And so now we will have other people, like same lawyers who I'm saying here. They are the ones who will be now following, where is this other family, for us to head in court and now bring another case. Because that's how we are as Kenyans. So I want to tell him in a very humble way, all these issues, and I remember that is where they had an issue with justice. At that time when the DCI were really following up also, and he got a bit emotional and just went through with she's one of, Esther is one of the, Lady Esther is one of the best, by the way, in terms of issues of corruption courts. And so I don't know whether he's assuming now they will go on these other matters. I am hoping he's preparing serious grounds to explain the will of the brother. Because in other words, what people will be saying, so if you can do this to a brother, what about the country? How do we trust you? Because it's in family that people trust you. And I'm not saying he has done it. I am just trying to say how I wish he can explain it better. And then the sons can be there to support him and say, no, our uncle did what was right and doesn't need to be here. The lawyers can attest and they will be there.
Did he release his cards too soon?
Let me say this. I think Honorable Deputy President is not that clean person. We agree entirely. But the charges are now mutating into something that was not necessarily among the 11 charges.
It's there.
And no, I will tell you. Now you're trying to say that Kenyans have grown to the UK standard where they will really, they will troll you for being not very moral.
You said the Senate are very well.
We are in this country, Honorable Elachi. We are in this country. I mean, you look at Honorable late Moi, how has he handled his family? You look at the Honorable former president, I mean the first president of this country, how has he handled his family? Yeah. You come to Honorable Mwai Kibaki, our late, great economist. How did he handle his brother? I mean, it's all there on social media. Then you come to Uhuru Kenyatta, then now you come to our president. How they have handled their immediate families and brothers and sisters, it's all there. So, and you say now, fine, we are handling the DP, we are not handling the president, we are not handling the former president, and I agree entirely. But who are Kenyans? Kenyans will actually love to have a honest thief sitting in office. As opposed to brother? You are going to troll the deputy president, how did you handle your brother? And I am totally agreeable when it comes to you cannot mishandle your late brother's family and actually sit in as deputy president. My question will be, when did he mishandle his brother's family? Was it now in the impeachment or before? The same clique of people insisted that you have to be our deputy president. So were you conning him so that once he goes in, then you come back and actually drop him? What was the whole issue? So I think much as the Senate may not actually have the time to go into all that, let us not bring in sort of non-issues, trying to whip more emotions at this level that, oh, you are not. So regarding Gachagua is not that clean. I agree entirely. I agree. I mean, you are. Beatrice is worried whether I actually mean it.
My only worry.
Maribo, you are coming to the point I said.
My only worry.
Beyond legal.
My only worry is he has just forgotten the Senate, and that's why I used that case. Had to ensure they have impeached the deputy governor of Kisii because of mishandling the brother and the young man who was there of the sister. That's why they took him home.
So,
even going further.
Let me finish my point then. That it is a very good hearing in the Senate for us to see all these things, so that this advice that he should resign today, because you want to safeguard him so he goes to again mistreat his family or something. I mean, let's have the Senate hearing the matter. Let the deputy president defend himself. Let us finally probably go to court. Let the democratic space open up in this country.
Kipto, you talk about a resignation, and even as you come in, the deputy president admitted in that televised speech that he knows his work is done. The reason he was onboarded is pretty much done. When you juxtapose that with the advice you're offering on resignation, where does that leave him?
Then it means if he says that his job was to, for example, he said, if I remember the interview, he mentioned that he was basically there to demonize and fight Uhuru. And once that was done and they got to government, he was discarded. Then that should be even the basis of my advice. So what are you still doing? Don't wait to be guillotined. Why should you be buried in one soup? Look, this is someone who, if you look at his meteoric rise as a politician, served one term as a member of parliament, deputy president, and at the moment captures the attention of the mountain. In a way, you would see the negative reaction that has really come strongly from the mountain, tells you he has a following. So why would you trade off that with a view of trying to to be a precedent? The way my senior is saying, Nyaribo is advising that let us run through the motion so that we have precedents for us lawyers to use and refer to. Oh, fine. And we are already doing that. And that's why there are so many court cases on the same. That's why Senate has done quite a number. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those trials. He can even wait penultimate period. Let me show you how this works. A simple proposal. Run through, defend yourself, go through cross-examination, re-examination, submission, just before the vote. Do your math. Do I have the numbers or I don't? If I don't have the numbers, throw in the towel. Everything falls in. Simple. And then that's when he can even mention that aspect of, I feel I was used. I feel I'm no longer needed and all that. I live to fight another day. I have done my best. In fact, he can even give a very nice rousing speech and say, look, I have defended myself before the National Assembly. I've defended myself before the Senate. I've left it to God. The usual politician's way of now rousing the spirituality. Lastly, which is more important, what Honorable Biti Zerachi was trying to bring on the table was the idea of smoking gun. When he spent a lot of time talking about the family dynamics, Kenyans love social stories. And that's why the media, whether TV and radio, what sells is social stories, mushene. And he got into, for me, it's a slippery slope, whereby you are opening up yourself to so many questions, so many innuendos, and the time frame being small. And again, to my senior, bear with the fact that the time is small. And as a lawyer, just like when you present before a judge, you don't have the whole 1 week to present and present and present like the way Fidel Castro used to address the General Assembly. The judge will tell you, I'm giving you 15 minutes. So be it.
Make your case.
So with that, I would feel, based on that aspect, there's a danger of a cheeky senator here, there, opening that space where there are contradiction. And it's the emotional little social aspects that make a difference. Look at too, she said about Kisii Deputy Governor. Do you forget that Kawira Mwangaza survived on that emotional aspect of women's sexual harassment? Just that. Every other thing was forgotten. But the second round when she came, that was not an issue. Yeah. Again, she couldn't survive. So there's a lot of dynamism around that. And that's why I say, for me, I want him to have that calculative political instinct in him. This is the point. Yes. I agree with Nyaribo, for purposes of our constitution, for the purposes of testing our democracy, for the purposes of testing our systems, let him run through the course, but don't allow a vote be put.
Maringa,
just cut off
for political expediency, I don't think Rigathi Gachagua will resign. Okay. This is not a governor's impeachment, by the way, and as I said, it is a matter of who does he represent? Besides the fact that he was elected by 7+ million voters, so of course everybody, including Beatrice Alachi, that time refused. They rejected the results. But 7 people actually elected him and the president as the presidency. So it's not a small matter to say it's just going to be a political process and probably then lawyers will fight in the courts and all that. This is something bigger. There is already seismic movement around certain region of Kenya, and it is sort of affecting the other regions of the country. So whether this gentleman is actually in the end impeached, it will have serious political ramifications in our country. So whether they say he will be impeached and they are so sure he will be impeached, and then, it's political process, it is true. That political process seems to be fighting to bite, at least from a certain section of the country.
Is it a Murima problem? I mean, where does this then leave the mountain with all the names that we are seeing?
No, but the names are there. Let me say this. Okay. You see, the only problem with us Kenyans, and I think that's why our country hurts, is because we get quickly and we decide, we even forget our own history, where we've come, what we have done. We clean ourselves when we've done wrong. We pat you and say you are good. That is why we are in this mess. Sometimes it's good to just hold 1 minute and ask yourself, because these are the issues. I mean, we are speaking all this, but I'm hoping in God's eyes, the Deputy President can look into his bedroom in the mirror and tell God, I did wrong here, yes. And Father, I need you this week. I did wrong here, yes. And everyone does wrong, and we agree. But we agree that you do wrong and you accept and you repent.
God forgives.
That is what. And God forgives.
But President has not forgiven him.
But let me say this. God forgives and forgives when he has taken you through a fire that you have never seen. He forgives. That's why you will see the process in the Bible. It's fire. There's nothing there that you just forgive and you leave. No. But then, having said that,
the possible replacement.
For me, as the replacement should just go back to Central. Okay. Up to the president, for purposes of respecting the people of Central and where the vote came from. It is their seat. You give it to them. Nobody will question. The purpose of us also learning a lesson from all this, that sometimes it is good when God gives you something to get out of anger. Because I will tell you, anger is what has brought the Deputy President to where he has reached. The Deputy President is very lucky with one thing. During the time of Uhuru Kenyatta, we never gave the President, William Samoei Ruto, an accounting officer, a PS. No, not in his docket, but he had a PS. He was even given an opportunity to have, everything that was on disposal. Now,
in that executive order,
which the president never enjoyed for 10 years, never. So now, all this where we have reached really is very sad that we can come and now, with all this, we normally say, ukijitoa sasa ujioshe, uoge, basi utaogeshwa. Na utaogeshwa yale hujawahi ona. You will be even shocked when somebody is telling you something of the time you were DO. And you'll be wondering, this is not part of it. But that is how it happens even in court.
Yeah.
People even bring me, I remember I was taken, and
I saw many times.
They brought me a house which they were saying it was supposed to be, which we have never bought up to today in the county assembly. But that time Kenyans believed that is where I live. Kenyans believed I went for plastic surgery. Kenyans believed that I used a first class with public resources. And it went. So for you, when you look at all the impeachments that have been there, they will go to your personal. And I am telling you, in this case, the case that is coming in front, and I am telling my deputy president, will be about the property of your brother. KRA will be coming in to ask the source of the money. That is now when we remember there would have been some source of where you've gotten the money. Were you paying cash or was it being transferred so that you have those tier? If it was cash, another question comes in. I mean, and I'm hoping, that's what I was saying, I'm hoping you have issues of outspans very clear, issues of Olive Gardens very clear, because that case, gross violation, is coming to land there. That's where it will be rubbed so hard.
As you come in, what would have caused the rift between the two?
So I'll comment on that questions and two others. So the first one, what could have caused the rift? Basically, I suspect the deputy president moved in too fast, too quick, just like the way my former colleague speaks about the idea that what was the nature of the deputy presidency he had. And that's one thing that is being put on the feet of the president, that he promised, he gave his word, that his deputy president will never be harassed and all those kind of things. I feel that the difference is quite small. In Kenya, deputy presidency or any deputizing in a political space does not come with entitlement. That is one lesson. Any position where you are deputizing in politics don't come with entitlement. Humility until and when you develop wings. If I'm to use the history of the 7 to 10 vice presidents we've had over the years, then I would compare Rigathi with the likes of Jaramogi, who the moment they disagree bolted out. And you see it was short, it was very short-lived. But the rest who stayed longer are those that played second fiddle calmly, with humility and knowing their place. That's why, for example, you had Mwai Kibaki doing 10 years, you had President Moi doing more than 10 years, you had George Saitoti being the longest serving, 12 to 14 years, you had Kalonzo, even though short-lived, 5 years, no fight, nothing. William Ruto did mix. In the first 5 years, he played along nicely. And I think that's what Rigathi was supposed to do. Play nicely, be okay, and if it is as per the facts, which Honorable Elachi is saying, where you're given support by being a PS and all those, ride with us, be seen to support the agenda of the presidency. Then make your move politically in the second term, once the president now is on his exit. At least it is understandable, it is within the context that succession is here. That for me is where I think the rain started beating. And remember, this is a coalition of so many people, and in a way, the entry point of Raila Odinga and the team in this broad-based aspect quickened the demise of this relationship, because now Brigadier was right in saying his job was to appear to be the attack dog of the ruling regime. Now, who are you attacking? The person you purported to attack is now in. So how do you recalibrate back and work with? I felt that that didn't happen. Possibly grumbled, possibly fought back, possibly now it exacerbated the relationship that finally fell off. That's one. Two things that I need to focus our audience with as we go to the trial tomorrow. Difficult days are ahead. Leave alone the trial by Thursday, because that is well set. It will end with a vote. But what follows after that vote is where the game begins. And that's where the courts will be very critical. And that's where there's a lot of arguments and conversations. Not that the law is not clear, different interpretation. One, once the deputy president is impeached and the president seeks to nominate a new deputy president, how does gazettement work? Because if you look for the deputy governors, IBC has been down gazetting. And IBC has been gazetting, but on the basis there is a commission. Now, there's another quagmire. IBC is not functional because there's no commission in place. There's no chair. And these are deputy president who is part of a presidency, and the returning officer being the chair of the IBC. None of those people are there. Case in point, Kisii County, they had to go to court to get an order to compel the CEO, Marjan, to gazette the new deputy governor. Uasin Gishu is still in court. The deputy governor has not been sworn in, has not been vetted by assembly because of that. Now, for the deputy president, it's a whole milestone. In fact, there are counter arguments, I'm sure Nyaribo would closely identify with this, where other lawyers are arguing, by virtue this is a presidency issue, because the threshold given for president and the deputy president is the same under the constitution, then it means it can only be the chair. Now that has to be determined and settled by court. That's one. Keep an eye on that. Number two, courts can make a decision post the fact. They can review. That's why they have administrative review option. There's a very fierce debate among lawyers whether court can review a decision. In my opinion, yes. Nothing else their jurisdiction over reviewing. Keep an eye on that. So those are two outcomes that we'll immediately face. If the impeachment happens successfully, there'll be a challenge. All these processes will be taken to court. And by virtue, there's a 3-judge bench already tells you the court is taking it seriously. Number two, there'll be a challenge about gazettement before Parliament can vet. And that fight will be about IEBC, which would mean, and I predict, there'll be a protracted long period of time before a successor is actually sworn in office, because it may even force the government of the day to constitute IEBC if it goes that direction where the court says it must be gazetted by IEBC through a chair of the commission. There's no shortcut. Parliament will be recalled immediately to start again the process of constituting IEBC, because there was already a panel. Lastly, which is more important, is that the question you asked about replacement, I wouldn't want to be in the place of the president at the moment. It appeared so easy when this story of impeachment started. It was almost assumed that Kithure Kindiki, having been the favorite during the Kenya Kwanza political negotiations to be the running mate ahead of Rigathi, the assumption has been, and it was, that he would be the shoe-in candidate. But have you noticed look at the hate and political activities and the dynamics shifting every day. Why? Honorable Brisa Lacha said very clearly here that take it back to Central. When you say Central, do you mean Mount Kenya? Because you have East-West. So there's a debate of East-West, there's a debate of Central-Central. That's why you find, listen, that's why you find candidates from Central's name popping up. You have Anne Waiguru, the Governor Kirinyaga, you have Governor Muranga, Irungu Kangata, you've seen the name of Ichungwa floating by. Ndindi Kemba disappeared by virtue he didn't partake in this. So the three names have been. And something interesting to show that the names indeed are part of consideration, the media has been name dropping the names. Number two, in the social media, there's been hit jobs on each other. Waiguru had to come and put a post about her journey. And then what followed was a vitriol, possibly sponsored by a purported competitor. So, and by virtue MPs will be voting, don't forget that aspect. Actually, I empathize with the new deputy president, because this time MPs will remind this new guy, remember we chased the guy who was here. Number two, we have to approve you. Sasa kama utakuwa unashika simu zetu, so a parliament will be more empowered over the executive than it was before. Previously, you will find a deputy president who could talk down parliament. This time it's not going to happen. You will find a deputy president who would want to be in the good books of parliamentarians, because one, they chased the predecessor, but number two, they have approved him. So that's what I'm saying. Actually, the biggest headache for the president is choosing a successor.
No, but I think he has two options. When they were deciding who would be the deputy president, all the members voted for Kindiki.
True.
So you just look at that. Or it is now for his decision to say, if not Kindiki, I have this.
And has some MPs have even complained about that.
Last word.
MPs have complained about that.
Let's get your closing remarks.
Times have changed.
Yes.
Number one, that pre-2022 deal was for that time. And Kithure Kindiki is not necessarily a front runner right now. In fact, getting that Raila Odinga has come into the mix and is probably fronting Gladys Wanga and and that's a possibility, by the way.
Those are now propaganda politics.
In fact, there are people who are saying Raila Odinga himself should be considered. So my point
already declared candidacy.
Those politics of saying Mount Kenya, that is the reason why there is an impeachment today, and you are still saying this is their seat. So that's where the problem is. So I think the pre-2022 deal was a deal. And if now they want to think about Kithure Kindiki actually to be a deal, and the others like Musalia Mudavadi must be considered. But lastly, we don't have an IEBC, like my colleague has said. You are still so bent to processing an impeachment through a parliament that Kiptu is trying to actually imagine that they are independent, that the National Assembly was very independent in the way they voted, which which is really, it's a lie. We all know that they were totally influenced, they were totally pushed. I mean, you, Honorable Beatrice, you know very well that you are told, people were called, into meetings, they were told, this is the way to go. If not, we will remove you from the committees.
I don't have
I'm not saying that was bribery. I'm not saying that was bribery, but I'm saying...
I don't have a committee.
No, there are many. In short, the National Assembly, honestly, was not independent. So when it comes to now, after impeachment, and there is no IEBC, if somebody was so worried about the nation, you would say, okay, we see that we don't have an IBC. Really, let's not subject the country into such a constitutional void and fights in court. We have the chairman has to, gazette the new DP, and that chairman is not there. So I think that we take Kenyans so casual and not so serious when it comes to what will happen. And it is true. These are not, by the way, this is not fiction. Somebody will go to court and say, it is the chairman. Where is the chairman? Is there a functional IBC? So that's what I'm saying. When you have a love for the country, you become tolerant, you move with the deal. And again, Honorable Elachi, when you agree with people, please walk the road, walk the deal. I mean, if you agree that tukienda pale, sijui it is government of shares, whatever, I mean, walk the deal. Try to eliminate a lot of excitement, but walk the deal. Don't reach in between and do what exactly the former regime did to you. Try to walk the deal, at least survive the pain until 2027. So it is so wrong to actually drop one party now and process an impeachment for him and then make him look all bad and bring out all manner of evil. Of course, if anyone had to uncover us, we are all evil, in one way or the other.
No, I agree.
You get the last word, yes.
I agree, we are all evil. But now let me say, it never started again. This matter started again with Central people. Themselves. No any other tribe thought. In fact, in the beginning, we had said, this is not our matter. But when you come and you stand on every podium, just like the way Stinia has done, you start bringing Baba on issues that he has no business with, and you start abusing Baba, and you start saying, why would not every one of ODM sign this thing? After being told that Baba, even everyone prays for Baba to die, they will wait. The 6.2 million also are people, isn't it? And they pay tax. You don't tell them that. You don't tell their leader that. And I remember telling them, you have just rattled the whole process. You have decided to take the deputy yourselves. Because instead of now looking for allies, you have decided to have more enemies than allies. People don't do that. But I think I want to finalize by saying this. Yes. It's a very difficult process. It's a very, very difficult time for our country. It is a time when I think some of these lessons we have to learn so hard, and we must ask God, a few of ourselves, where have we done wrong that we have to go through such painful processes in Kenya for the last 6-7 months, just following each other? It's not very good. And I am hoping after we have finalized everything, whatever happens to my deputy president, I want to wish him well. Okay. And I want to tell him, sometimes you might feel it's a very tough process, but sometimes God wants you to reflect and remind you who he is, but also to remind yourself, where have I come from and where am I going? And maybe give you a better vision if you want to now lead, to lead in a different way. So you might be very angry, but maybe also God has, this is your process. You must go through it. You must go through with reasons. Oh, okay. But it's only God who knows those reasons.
My parting shot.
So I wish him well. I wish him really well.
Just one comment, because I know our time is up, not more than 30 seconds. My parting shot would be, there's a scenario that we also, that's why I say it's a difficult time for the country. If by any chance the court quashes the decision under review, you will be facing a case of constitution winning because all the arms would have made their say, but a governance crisis because you have an irretrievably broken relationship between the president and the deputy, and you wouldn't want a 3-year brinkmanship at the helm of the executive. So it would be better that this process be decisive, all arms to play their role, legislature is doing their bit, then the role will come for the judiciary. Executive will equally play their role when it comes to the issues I raised about IEBC, nomination, and all those kind of things. So that the Constitution wins, but at the same time, to have a decisive decision. That is important.
I think they can still agree. What's the big deal?
We can still agree.
They can still agree.
Miracles happen.
Miracles happen. Judy Chebet, you say on X, we have faith in our Senate. Given today's ruling of Kericho governor, we hope they will handle the Deputy President's impeachment motion impartially. That is on X, formerly Twitter. Someone says, tell Elachi you still remember what he said in Bomas regarding the impeachment.
Well, let me say this today. It is very wrong that I can start a sentence and say wacha. I paused because TJ was speaking in his mother tongue, and the only misfortunate I did was to proceed bigger and to say again wacha, and everyone has an opinion. How come nobody picked the last sentence? How come you just picked Piga? But I have said this in God's eyes. If I ever said that to Morara to be beaten, then I know in God's eyes I have something to answer. But if Morara and team did it deliberately, by December, God also answers.
What a way to wind up the show tonight. I've been speaking to Ishmael Nyaribo, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, Beatrice Elachi, Member of Parliament for Dagoretti North, as well as Joshua Kipto, former Speaker, Nandi County Assembly, and also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. We thank you for your splendid company and for your tremendous feedback. That's all the time we had for right here on the Daily Report. My name is George Maringa. On sign language interpretation has been Rhoda Nyamai. I also thank the crew behind the scenes also for the wonderful job they've done to bring you this broadcast. As always, stay safe and be kind to one another. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night from Nairobi.